Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturbide, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history, welcome, and enjoy. Doing our deep dives, my favorite thing to do. You know, you can say, a lot of people say 50 Fight Club member, not 50 Fight Club. This guy has had 50 fights. This dude has a very extensive amateur background. And not only that, amateur football, you can call it amateur. It was college football, one of the best football playing programs in the world by far. Just a great UFC fighter, looking fantastic in his last two fights. Great friend of the show, Eryk Anders. Eryk, how you doing, brother?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? Just just getting in from training. Thank you guys for having me.
And where were you training at?
I'm down here in Brazil in Santos. It's in Sao Paulo, and just did a little jiu-jitsu, some light rolls, and just get a sweat, keep it moving, keep it. I don't like to get stagnant in between fights, but sure. I'm not training very hard, but keeping the cardio right, keeping my weight down, and sweating a little bit.
You look great your last fight, by the way, man. How'd you feel? Do you feel good? You feel as good as you look?
Yeah, I think I fight better at middleweight. I prefer middleweight. This was a rematch from a middleweight fight that Darren Stewart, who I fought, wanted to fight at light heavyweight this time. So I got the fight rule to no contest, so I felt I owed him a little bit. So okay, whatever. The weight really doesn't matter, but I prefer middleweight. So yeah.
So Eryk, like where you're at in your career, you're obviously a fan favorite. You've headlined a UFC in the past, but I'd like to kind of bring things back to your first fight. Your first recorded bout is January 28th, 2012, in AXC against Kevin Tidwell. Was that your actual first fight, or was there something before that?
Nah, I had my first two fights actually in the same night, probably just a month after training. The first gym that I walked into, I wouldn't advise anybody go to that gym or train with that coach ever. To me, that's like, you couldn't be any more incompetent than you've only been training a month, go fight. Yeah, sure. And then he didn't even show up to the fight. So, I was, in the locker room, I was like, damn, I don't have a coach. I don't got nobody here to rub my hands. So I asked another fighter who was fighting after me. I was like, hey, this first fight's a boxing match. The second fight's an MMA fight. Do you, you don't even have to tell me anything. I just need someone to hold the stool there and, give me some water. And at first he said no. So I was just like, all right, whatever. I guess I'll just lean up against the ropes in between rounds. And, but then right before the fight started, he came out there and did his part, came out there, cornered me. And I wouldn't advise anybody fighting after just a month of training. You don't even know. I didn't know how to throw a punch. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just, in there surviving. And,
how old were you? How old were you then?
I was 24. This was after college. So, I was, still a pretty good athlete, but at the same time, this fighting isn't a pickup game of basketball. You can't just go out there and shoot, but that's exactly what I did,
Eryk, that's a very old school way of doing it, man. That's how it used to be. We had Nick Thompson on. He goes and trains for a week and goes and has a couple fights. But he goes 1-3, and these are pro fights because he's fighting killers. So that's an old school way of doing it. But can you tell me, what was your – I talked about your background. What got you into fighting? That was Michael Wright, your first fight. What got you into the sport to begin with?
Man, I just found myself being frustrated. I played college ball, won a national championship, and within a year or about maybe a year and a half after that last game, I was done with football. I was living back in Tuscaloosa, cleaning factories, cleaning toilets, working as a janitor. I just found myself being super frustrated that, I was doing this with a college degree in the same town that I had just won a national championship in, less than 18 months prior. And wow. I just did not think that this was how, it was going to turn out. You know, every player knows that the NFL, even if you do make it, there's a small chance and it's a very small percentage that you play for a long time. So, you know, I was cool with football being over with, but I just did not expect to be doing the kind of stuff that I was doing. You know, especially with the college degree, because back then everybody was like, get a degree, plan for life after football or whatever. So I thought I did that. And, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back is, man, I would go to these lunches with these executives and CEOs of these companies or whatnot, you know, and they would tell me it would be a job interview, and I was like, cool. And then, you know, they would come in, we'd spend like 2 hours talking about Nick Saban and Mark Ingram. And in my head, I'd be like, oh, man, this is what it's supposed to be, you know? And then at the end, they'd be like, no, you know, we don't have any job openings or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I needed to blow off some steam, man. I found myself, you know, being a pretty, upset all the time, fighting all the time, you know, in bars, outside of bars. And, you know, I already had a son, so I was like, man, I'm going to get myself in trouble or get hurt, you know, whatever. So let me go to a gym so I can put all this frustration into a heavy bag or into some jiu-jitsu or whatever. And, man, probably a month after that, I had my first fight.
All right, so the crazy part is, Eryk is like a pure athlete. Like, it's USDA grade A friggin' athlete. Like, the guy walks in, you're like, yeah, he's doing something professional. And then you watch his first fight. He's in shin pads. It's an amateur bout, so they got him in shin pads against this guy, Kevin Tidwell. I honestly, I almost didn't want to watch him because I'm like, man, someone's gonna die. Like this is like where the train goes off the tracks. Was it difficult for you because you played football at the highest levels, obviously, of college ball, and you know a little bit in the NFL? Was it difficult for you to kind of start at the bottom again in a new sport?
No, not really, because my first experience with sparring was Walt Harris, and you know I walk in the gym, and you know the coach, again incompetent, asking a 24-year-old male, you know, who just got done playing football, if he could fight. Yes, I can fight. Of course I can fight. You know, I thought I could fight until I fought somebody who knew how to fight. And then for me,
we're getting
I
to that.
realized,
we're getting to that. We're getting to that one.
But then I realized, like, dude, I don't know how to fight. I can't fight. You know, these aren't just bozos in the street. You know, so like I understand like that day. But that's when I fell in love with the sport. I was like, okay, you know, this is an opportunity for me to learn something. You know, it was just fun for me. I got beat up, but man, I had such a good time. It was such a rush. And I was like, dude, I don't even know how to fight. I don't even know what I'm doing. I have no idea what's going on. I spent probably 4 minutes and 50 seconds of a 5-minute round in the corner, you know, with my arms over my head, you know, getting beat up in the nicest way possible from Paul Harris. And, man, I fell in love with the sport right then and there. And I knew that I would have to work, you know, hard. You know, I'm a workhorse, you know.
So on your second fight that I saw, your second recorded bout was on Cage Wars 5 against Jake Reeves. You knocked him out in the first round. You actually looked really comfortable on the ground. I mean, and it's, you know, a few months after you started training, but your ground game looks, you know, pretty tight at that point in time.
Well, you know, I wrestled a little bit growing up, so like I had no idea what I was doing on my feet, you know. So my main goal was just to grab people, get them on the ground, and then, you know, pound them out. But actually, that Jake Reeves fight, man, that was probably like my 7th or 8th fight, you know. I fought a couple times.
No wonder it looked comfortable.
You know, before Jake. And so, yeah, you know, it was a little bit later in my amateur career. You know, I lost my 3rd fight. You know, I got beat up pretty good from a guy. His name's Justin Patterson, I believe. He ended up going and fighting for Bellator a few times, and yeah, he beat me up pretty good. But I think I went 2-1 my first one. or my first few fights. And then, man, you know, I just, those first few fights, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I lacked in. And then, you know, so it's all kind of a learning experience for me. And still is.
So with your bout against Justin Patterson, like, was that just kind of like, you realized, did anyone have that conversation with you? Like, maybe you got to take this a little bit more serious, because obviously before this time, things were kind of coming pretty easy for you.
Well, man, I was always pretty dedicated. Because I knew that this is what I wanted to do, because I knew that, like, just doing 9 to 5, sitting at a desk, it was never going to suit me. So I'd train in the morning, work all day, go train again. So, man, I've always worked pretty diligently and hard. I just didn't have the coaching, so I didn't know what I didn't know, if that makes sense.
When did
that Justin? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. So at this point, you're still at that same gym you talked about. I mean, how long were you at this gym?
Man, I was there for about 2 years, and the straw that broke the camel's back for me, because there's really nothing here, and there was nothing really in Birmingham. And really, the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Like, I already knew that, like, we never drilled any ground game. We never drilled takedowns. We never drilled anything, any kind of attached fighting, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, you know? So I'd get in the fight, and the whole fight would be wrestling, you know? So I would go do jiu-jitsu elsewhere and you know, whatever. But, you know, we were drilling one day, and I finally asked a question, and I was like, hey, you know, how do I get out of a triangle? And the coach, his explanation was, just don't get in it. And I'm like, well, that ain't gonna work for me, because I'm not just gonna ask this dude to put me in a triangle. I'm not gonna invite it, you know. But all my fights, I'm on top. They're on the ground, you know, for the most part. So, like, I need to know how to grapple and defend submissions and whatnot. When he said that, I was like, man, I'm out of here. And that's about when I started training with Chris Conley at Spartan Fitness.
All right, so, like, for instance, you're fighting against Justin Patterson, your first loss, which, man, it's super important. Like, you kind of see what a person's made of. You know, you get that loss, and either, you know, you quit, or you push yourself forward. So that was about 5 hours away. Was that your first airplane ride to a flight? To a fight, I should say?
Nah, baby, we drove about 6 hours to New Orleans. That was my first time cutting weight. That was my first time fighting at 205. And, man, again, like, I didn't know anything, and neither did the people who were my alleged coaches. So, man, I cut this weight to 205. And the only thing that I could think about was drinking. So, man, I was drinking, but I didn't eat anything. You know, I didn't eat very much. I had like a bowl of rice. They had like some gumbo, some Louisiana food. So I ate like a bowl of rice and probably like 3 gallons of water. And so, man, I'm talking about the next day I just didn't feel right. Like, I was go for a run, and, you know, that was kind of like my way of seeing how my body felt. It's like, okay, I'm a little tired. Maybe I need to do this, or I need to pace the fight, or whatever. And, man, I was just tired and lethargic all day. And, you know, the first clinch exchange, man, I just felt everything burning, you know, you don't have any nutrients in your body. So you don't have any energy. And so long story short, thank God it was 3 minutes, 3-minute rounds. It was 3 5-minute rounds, you know. But it might as well have been a pro fight, because, man, I was getting eaten in the face. You know, I was like, it was, you know, there was like, the only thing that I didn't get hit with was an elbow, probably. And but there was no quit, like, and that was a long ass drive home too, like 6 hours with a busted nose, and you get beat up pretty good. You know, you feel like shit. But, you know, it never crossed my mind that I was going to quit. You know, I didn't think that I would have my first loss within my first 3 fights, but, you know, this is the nature of the game that we play. It's like, okay, you know, it's an amateur fight. When I turn pro, it's 0-0 again. So, you know, that's why I had so many amateur fights, because, one, I fought for 2 years under an incompetent coach who, man, he would sign me up to fight every other weekend.
So that wasn't your choice. That was his.
Well, you know, I can't really put it all on him, because, man, I was making like decent money off sponsorships and stuff. So I was like, hell yeah, I fight, I get money. So, I was like, okay, but you know, I think a coach needs to be there to save the fighter from himself. You know, because you know, somebody who's a fighter, of course, if you offer him a fight, they'll be like, hell yeah, I'm a fight, you know, whatever. At least that's the way I was. I was like, okay, whatever.
Real fighters do. That's how real fighters want to fight everybody.
You know, and dude, but I wish somebody would have been there to be like, hey man, no, you just fought last week. You know, let's watch the film. This is what you didn't do good. Let's work on this. Let's develop, because it's not possible to get better in 2 weeks. I think, you know, you can't fight and then go out there 2 weeks later and expect to not make the same mistakes. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Now you said that, you know, you wrestled a little bit. Is that correct?
Yep. I got JV level experience wrestling.
I mean, but did you ever cut weight back then when you were wrestling back in high school?
I cut weight one time, and it was almost like the exact same experience that I had with that Justin Patterson fight. So I never cut weight again. I walked around at like 174 and wrestled at 171 and 172 or something like that.
So do you think it's like, I mean, to me, a lot of the guys who fight have had a huge wrestling background, and cutting weight second nature to them. I mean, did you feel like that was a big obstacle for you? Because until you learn how to cut weight, it's a terrible experience. You're never going to fight good, I don't think.
What was it like to be a sports writer? To be there for historical moments and unforgettable performances? Oh, there are stories. I'm Todd Jones, recovering from 30 years as a sports writer. Join me on Pressbox Access. You'll hear from some of the best reporters and writers of the past 50 years about their experiences with the greatest athletes, coaches, and sports events. We tell stories behind the stories. Some we've only told each other. And there's some laughs, too. Let us buy you around on Pressbox Access.
You know, they used to suck really bad, and I always felt like I was at an experience and skill disadvantage, especially as a professional, because some of these guys grew up doing Muay Thai or boxing or, you know, black belt in jiu-jitsu or whatever. So I just feel like if I was the bigger, stronger guy, at least I had an advantage in one area of the competition. Mm-hmm. And but man, they used to suck, especially when I was an amateur, because, you know, I'd be like 215 with like 10% body fat, and then try to cut to 185 the week of the fight, you know, just by not eating and running all day, you know, that kind of, you know, the old super old school. And but even, you know, I was doing too much. I feel like I was doing too much. This last fight when I fought Darren Stewart at 85 was the easiest fight, the easiest cut I ever had. And, you know, I changed camps again, and I started training at Fight Ready. And I was telling Eddie Chaw, Santino DeFranco, and Chad Nike, the strength and conditioning coach, you know, how I usually, you know, my routine to get to 185. And they're like, man, you're doing too much. Like, there's no way your body can sustain that. You know, I was running like 35, 40 miles a week.
At this point, Eryk's nickname is the Savage, and it's probably one of those things that's earned in training, because, you know, you watch your Instagram, you're always training. Like, you're always training.
Yeah, you know, like I said, I always knew, like, I wanted to do this. I always knew I wanted to go fight at the highest level, but I also knew that I was going to be at a skill disadvantage. Like I was saying earlier, like, these guys, they're not coming from football, man. These guys are coming from jiu-jitsu. They're coming from boxing. They're coming from Muay Thai or kickboxing or karate or whatever. So I was trying to play catch-up pretty much early on in my career.
Now, did you ever consider leaving maybe Alabama or the area? Because, I mean, to me, I think of a guy, if you did that football program for 4 years, you experienced, you know, coaching and direction and everything that you felt immediately. Oh shit, I'm lacking that. You had that already at the highest level. What, you know, did you think about maybe going somewhere else to get that quick, or were you determined to stay at home?
Super Jim.
Man, I traveled and trained a lot of places, but man, I had my first son when I was in college, and his mom and I are not together, and you know, she's from Alabama. She ain't never gonna leave Alabama. And I think that me being a father to my son was more important than anything that I ever wanted to achieve in life. So, you know, I tried to make it work and make it happen in Alabama. But, you know, even these past 2 fights, I've gone out to Arizona for fight camp. So, you know, I'm gone for, you know, 8-9 weeks at a time. And then I'm home for the, you know, when I'm not training. So maybe I should have done that earlier on in my career. But at the same time, I still made it. I still got there. You know, I still got plenty of time and fight left in me. So, you know, I don't think it's too late, especially if you look at the, you know, the skills that I've gained from my last fight to, you know, the fight before that. You know, I feel like and look like a totally different fighter. So, you know,
okay.
Yeah.
So
hold on, nothing but respect for that, man. I gotta appreciate you staying home like that. I always stayed at home in Indy, same, you know, I had wife and kids. I'm like, I wasn't willing to up and move. So I gotta respect that. Now you're in the position where you go take away for a few months and get at camp. That's awesome. I think you did the right way, but go ahead.
So the thing with Eryk is he's saying, all right, he takes a loss. He has 3 more fights from March to July. So like it's almost like a rabid. You're almost rabid for fighting, and including a sport fight against Nathan Gaylord, which was a split decision win for yourself, which was a very close fight. Do you remember going? There was a lot of fanfare. There was a lot of people watching you at that event. Like they had some questions.
It was super fun to fight a guy. That guy had a lot of hype. You know, he trained with
Hardcore Gym in Athens.
Yeah. You know, they had some UFC guys that came out of there. Todd Duffy.
Brian Bowles and Forrest Griffin was out of the
Brian Bowles, yeah. So they had champions coming out of that gym. So they were a real MMA gym, and I was just going out there, you know, and just fighting, you know. But it was a super fun fight, you know. I had all the physical attributes, you know. We were pretty, you know, much the same stature, but I think I was a little bit quicker, a little bit stronger, a little bit more powerful. Man, but, you know, I got cracked pretty good in that fight, I remember. But I think the momentum kind of changed. Like, he hit me with a solid, good shot. And, you know, I don't know if you guys, but I'm sure, Chris, you know, like, you get hit with a solid shot and it's like, you know, that white flash goes in front of your face.
Oh, yeah.
But he knew he cracked me. But man, I just kind of, you know, my face never changed, and I kept marching forward. So I think it kind of broke him mentally, because he just, after that, he just wasn't the same. And you know, that's him hitting me. You know.
Yeah, but when you hit somebody with your best shot and it doesn't hurt them, you're like, I mean, that does, it deflates you, man. It's like, what can I do to hurt this guy? That does deflate you. So your good poker face probably helped out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So had
so you had Walt Harris in your corner. You did.
Yes. We were both training at the same gym at the time, and I think Walt was in my corner, but man, I knew that my coach was not competent, so he would tell me to do stuff, and I was like, man, it's probably not the right thing to do. That's probably not what I should be doing at this moment. So,
like the counter indicator.
Yeah. So I started listening to his corner and what they were saying. So, you know, because as an amateur, you really don't know how to play the game. Like when your coach says, like, you know, your left hand is there. He's not telling you to throw it now. You know, put it in your back pocket, save it, set it up, come back to it later. But a lot of the guys I fought as an amateur, I would just listen to their coach, because whatever their coach said to do, they would do right after he said it. So I was like, okay, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. So I was just like, sit back, be patient, and wait for him to do it, you know?
That's funny.
So there was a revolving group of nicknames for Eryk. I've written all of them down. For this fight, he was E-Money, just you know, for the people at home. It's very important. Very important
E-Money.
fact.
Yeah, man. I've had a few.
We gotta go. Oh, they're coming.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein's coming. I got that one too.
Yeah. I've had a few, man.
Question for you. Like you've been talking a little bit about coaching and wanting to get coaching. You did mention. Did you mention Santino DeFranco?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's
talk a little bit about him, because I think he would be a step up from the original guys you're talking about. I mean, he's a pretty competent guy, unless you got some other stories. I like that.
He is super competent, and he has a way of making it easy and simplifying everything. Sometimes I feel like people will show like a technique, or if you're in this situation, do this, and it's almost like a keto. Yeah, the shit works right now because we're drilling it, and he's letting me do it. But then when you go do it in real life, it doesn't work. Oh, yeah. But man, everything that he shows, man, is applicable to MMA, and it's not just jiu-jitsu. It's not just striking. It's not this. It's not just that. It is MMA. We work a lot off the wall, like strikes off the wall, strike to set up, takedowns, fakes, this, that, and the third. And I just think, a few more camps with these guys that, I'm really going to be in that top 10, top 5.
We go.
Echelon of middleweights.
Yeah, I'm glad Santino was one of those guys that very, very underrated fighter, and probably at this point making a better name for himself as a coach with guys like you. So I'm glad I got that question. I'm gonna give it back to Mike now.
He's won championships with Cejudo. He's in the Korean Zombies corner. Man, the guy just he gets it. He understands MMA and not just jiu-jitsu or just striking. It's MMA is everything, and it's not just this, that, or the third. It's all those things put into one pot.
All right. So in July, you have a close split decision against a guy that's 7-0 as an amateur. You're 6-1 at that time, and less than a month later, you fight for StrikeHard Productions, where you're chasing a title fight against Jimmy Rice, and in your way was Chase Horton, and it's at 185. Do you recall that, Bob?
Yeah. He was another big guy. I'm not gonna say, man, the guy was, juicing, so he always put pictures and videos and stuff up of him deadlifting 600 pounds and this, that, and the third, and in like 3 or 4 months, the guy went from like 185 pounds to 220. And that's
natural. So he's natural.
That's hard to do, man. So that's a lot of protein.
Saying his prayers, eating his vitamins.
Yeah.
So Hulk Hogan.
Well, I'd like to kind of qualify it like this. If there's a person in your life that just happens to have a party with the UFC on it, oh my gosh, Eryk Anders is fighting, so he can tell his friends. I think that's the guy.
And he still does. I'll be walking around and like, oh, do you Chase Horton? He said he beat you as an amateur, and I'm just like, oh yeah, well, what's Chase doing now? Because I'm fighting in the UFC, and winning at that, by the way, So, it is what it is. He's a good guy, but there's. I didn't lose very much as an amateur.
No.
So, but, some of the guys that I beat or felt like they beat me or whatever, there's another guy named
he's coming.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. Andre something.
Andre Hall.
Andre Hall, yeah. He's, these guys, never really achieved and beat me at a time where I didn't.
You were vulnerable.
You were still new, man. You were still learning. You hadn't been doing this sport forever.
Yeah, and it's all good. It is what it is. These were all learning experiences for me and things that were like that I felt were necessary to go through, because there's a lot of people who don't experience losses in amateur take that first loss as a pro because they didn't have to battle through any adversity. They didn't have to, go through anything to, just cakewalks and tomato cans for them. So,
Eryk, I bring that up all the time. I talk about, like, as a coach, I always tell people, they're not allowed to go pro unless you've been knocked down, until you've been cut, until you've been on your back. I mean, you have to do these things. You have to fight tough as an amateur because you don't want to find that out when you're a pro. Like you're saying, a lot of guys are 8-0 as an amateur. I'm like, you didn't learn shit, man. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You have to be tested as an amateur. And if you don't do that, you're not a good coach, and you're not – I mean, unless this guy's just unbelievably good and walking through everybody, but then you got to keep finding tougher competition because you're 100% right. You did all that tough stuff as an amateur, and you should have losses as an amateur, in my opinion. If not, you're not fighting tough enough.
And, man, you know, Chase, he submitted me. He armbarred me in a fight that I was winning, you know. And so, you know, that one really was a big blow to my pride and my ego, you know. I was like, damn, you know, I got caught slipping. And
I bet you learned from it, though.
I did. I don't think – I haven't been submitted since. So I guess he can hang that on his – I think he can hang that on his hat as well. Like, he's the only person to ever submit me in. You know, like,
was it your first fight at 85?
Well, we never fought to 85. We never got there because
they announced it.
You know, he wasn't gonna make the weight. And to tell you the truth, I was not gonna make it either. But he called them first and said that he wasn't gonna make it.
Okay.
So we really just fought at 200.
Okay.
But then I still didn't make. I weighed in at like 204. And I was like, dude, that's dumb. Why do that? You know, I can understand like 95 or 90 or whatever, but whatever, dude. I'm in here. So yeah.
You started chasing belts after that too, when you fought for the Fit Factory Fighting Championship for the 205-pound belt against Taylor Yeager. Was that your first title fight on the amateur circuit?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I'm not even sure what weight we fought at.
205.
I think that he fought for a while and then retired, and like he was coming back or getting back into it or whatnot. But man, I always felt like whenever I traveled out of state to go fight somebody from there, I was like, man, they're trying to set me up to lose. So it's imperative that I go out there and you know, finish the fight. And I think I finished Yeager in the first round, I believe.
Dude, he took a beating. He took a beating. But the thing is, like, he ate it. It wasn't like he took a couple punches and got out. Man, dude, he took a beating. He really did. Like, I mean, I know it's an amateur fight. When you bring it in an Eryk Anders, you have to assume the person across from you is probably getting paid because no one's taking that fight for free. And
well, man, to be honest, man, you know, finding amateur fights was not really ever an issue. So yeah, you're probably right. They probably were sliding a little, you know, something under the table to come fight. But at the same time, because they would always tell like, oh, former Alabama football player, whatever. But maybe they told them that I can't fight or didn't know how to fight, and they wouldn't be lying because I really didn't have any experience for real. A lot of like fights and cage time, but not a lot of training, and I think that's backwards. You know, I don't think that's how it's supposed to go.
You know, it's a Midwest mindset. Yeah, it's a Midwest mindset that he's talking about. A lot of guys here in the Midwest, they got 10, 12 amateur bouts before they actually start learning how to fight.
You learn to fight in the cage, man. That's not how it's supposed to be, but it's how it is.
Oh, man. Yeah, but back then I was just young and dumb. You know, I was just like, all right, cool, whatever. I fight. You know, fight whoever, whenever. You know, whatever. And I do believe that is the mentality that you need to have, but you need to have somebody who's answering the phone for you. You know, don't call it. You're not supposed to talk to the fighter. I feel like the fighter is the last person who's supposed to find out that he's fighting. I didn't have a manager at the time or whatever, but the coach is supposed to be like, he's supposed to be the filter. Because I'm not saying no to anybody. You know what I'm saying? He's the one who's supposed to be like,
true.
Eryk just fought last week. You know, he's not fighting again till whenever, but it won't be 2 weeks from now. You know, the
worst thing you can have is a brave manager. I mean, it's easy to be brave as a manager. I mean, as a coach, or a brave coach too. As a fighter, you need to think you can beat anybody, anytime, anywhere, and never turn out a fight. I remember once my guy told me like a month later, he's like, "Yeah, we had a boxing match. They called to see if we could fight Andre Ward." I was like, "Why did we say no?" They're like, "They offered us $5 grand." I was like, "I want to beat him." They're like, "No, you wouldn't." If I was like, "Who's Andre Ward?" Olympic gold medalist. I was like, "Oh shit." Yeah, I was like, "Yeah, I would have taken it." They're like,
Yeah,
they're like, that's why we didn't offer it to you, Chris, because I know you'd have said yes, and I would have. But like, you don't even offer it to me. That's what you need. You need not a brave manager. Brave managers get people killed and hurt, and you didn't have that, man. You had you doing it. Of course, you're gonna say yes. You're a fighter, man. What the hell, dude? How long have you been fighting this point? Is it still like in the first year or two, or what's going on?
A year and a half, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so you haven't made the switch yet. You ain't made the switch yet.
No. I'm still, fight promotions would hit me up on Facebook. Hey, do you want to fight? And then I'd be like, man, I'm fighting 2 weeks before that. Yeah, sure. Hell yeah, I'll do it, dude. I'd have like 3 months of fights lined up.
My
God. With like a week in between or 2 weeks in between. If I had, 24 amateur fights inside of 4 years,
Ooh, it's a lot.
Okay, but most of them were like in clusters though. Like I'm looking at your record. Yeah. It's not like it seems like you could tell like when he, got a rib injury or a hand injury, because there'd be like 3 or 4 months. Yeah, there'd be 3 or 4 months off, and then, another rapid pace. Like I was telling Chris, like we do 50 Fight Club members here. I'm like, Eryk Anders qualifies. I go, and he's got legit amateur fights. Like he's got amateur fights that, man, I'm jealous of. I wish I had.
Yeah. But again, that's a lot. I don't know what 24 divided by 4 is, but that's a lot of fights a year.
I think it's like 10. 10
yeah.
10 a year.
Depends on your math.
So you had a bout. One of your canceled bouts was against Daniel Jolly in San Antonio, Texas. I figured this was going to be like your homecoming fight, because you're from Texas. Obviously, you're, kind of made a name for yourself in Alabama, and the bout got canceled. And rather than go, oh my God, what am I going to do? You jump into a title fight at StrikeHard 22 against a guy that was on the Dana White Contender Series 2 times, and that's Justin Sumter.
Yeah, so, that fight is funny because, I think that may have been like my first or second fight at middleweight, and probably like my first successful. Because the first few times I tried middleweight, I didn't make it because the first time I sat in the sauna for like 6 hours straight, and man,
dude, you're like you're alive.
End, yeah, at the end, I was like, man, I think I'm done with this. My coach was like, nah, just a little bit longer. And I was like, John was his name. I was like, John, I'm getting out of the sauna, whether it's through you or around you. And I meant that from the bottom of my heart. Like I was gonna fight him right there in the sauna. He just stepped aside and let me out, and I was like, man, thank God, because I probably only got one punch in me right now, but I would put everything into it. And but that Justin Sumter fight, I successfully cut down, made weight, and we were doing our medicals, and I heard him say, like, have you had any surgeries? And I don't think I had any surgery at the time. And I heard him say, yeah, he had broke his jaw before. So I was like, oh,
okay,
cool. And so when we got in the fight, we got on the ground. I got on his back, and I had my arm like around his chin, not around his neck, and I just squeezed as hard as I could. And he tapped, but I knew, like, I don't know what kind of break he had in his jaw. I've broken my jaw, and it's not what I would think a break is. When I think it's broke, like his jaw had to be wired shut or whatever. And man, he tapped, But man, that's another guy. He'd always get online talking about he wanted to fight me again and this, that, and the third. And then he got knocked out twice on the Contender Series.
You know what though? But he made it there twice. Like he was on the radar twice. Like that's a legit fighter. Like
I'm pretty sure he fought the Bellator.
No, he for sure did. Yeah. But those. When I look at your record, you didn't avoid the hard fights as an amateur. Like you're not getting paid for those. Like you're talking sponsorships and stuff like that, but it pales in comparison what you could have made for that fight as a pro. Because that's a headline fight. Like that's end of the card. It's in Alabama, somewhere where you've got a name. And you never shied away from a hard fight. Like
Well, I never looked anybody up
respect.
neither. I never looked anybody up neither. I didn't know how good or bad somebody was. I never.
You never watched the fights?
Nah, the promoter would just be like, "Hey, I got this guy, Justin Sumter. He's, 7-2 or whatever, or what. I don't remember what his record was, but
it was 5-1.
Yeah, but I was just like, all right, cool.
Would you have people who were honest with you, like this guy's pretty good, this guy's terrible? Would they be honest with you, or they just tell you whatever they had to get you in there?
The StrikeHard people, I felt like have always been legitimate and
for sure they're great.
Looked out for me, but I fought a lot, outside, all around the Southeast, and so I just assumed that whenever somebody from Tennessee or Mississippi or Louisiana or Georgia called me to go fight somebody, that I was going to fight probably their best guy or, one of their top guys. So I just had it in my mind that, this guy's going to be tough. He's going to be skilled. He's going to be this. He's going to be that. And, man, I just remember, I said I had 24 fights in 4 years. Man, like 7 or 8 of those months, I didn't fight at all because I had tore my Achilles. So, that's really 24 fights in like 3.5 years.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah.
So I was fighting at quite a pace.
Yeah. You also fought for V3 for the 205-pound title against Paul Rainey. And a lot of people were watching that fight because there was a lot of questions. People, when you got like an athlete like Eryk, people are they've always got questions. And they were like, well, it's about to get answered against Paul Rainey. And, you came out with your hand raised in that bout as well.
Yeah, I think he, man, I just feel like he was kind of like, I never watched any film or whatever. Whenever the fight started, I just felt like he was going to try and bully me and whatever. And, he tried to throw me and, he wasn't successful with the throw. And, long story short, after the first round, he didn't get off the stool for the second round and said that he tore his knee or did this or did that. But I think
he was done.
more so than his knee, his ego was hurt because I think that he thought that he had tore his ego. So
he had lost in like 5 years up until this point. He was like the number, like Eryk, you mentioned Tennessee. He was the number 1 ranked fighter in Tennessee. Like he was the man. Eryk comes in,
didn't last around.
Yeah.
Lasted one
round. And hey, that was one of my more satisfying wins because you get a guy who doesn't want to get off the stool. Not only did you beat him physically, but man, you beat him mentally. Yeah. You broke his spirit. So
you weren't breathing hard either. Like your cardio, you've always paced yourself really well. A lot of times that's something that people got to learn. And that's something you've had from the beginning. You never rushed. You just kind of waited.
Well, yeah, I just always felt like a lot of amateur fights are like 30 seconds in a cloud of dust and not always the best guy wins, because, there's adrenaline, there's hormones and stuff flowing through your body and your mind that you probably never felt before for a lot of these guys. But for me, I've competed pretty high at a high level, even though I wasn't fighting, I was still probably more conditioned and performing on a big stage than a lot of the guys. So I just felt like, we got 3 rounds, there's this fights, a lot of my fights ended in the first round, but we don't need to rush things. It's I feel like I had more of a professional's pace as an amateur than a lot of the guys. I'd catch a lot of guys coming in or, just kind of slowly creep my way to, get their back against the cage, take them down and beat them up from there. But, I think the patience was one of my biggest attributes, especially early on.
Did Omar Johnson was in your corner quite a bit around this period as well. How involved was he in your training regimen?
Man, that's another guy who played college football. He played at Sanford down there in Birmingham, and I'm pretty sure that he boxed as a child. When he was younger, and was training with Chris Conley at Spartan, so he was much better than than I was on feet. So, you know, he was always a good, you know, body, and, you know, he's always had an eye. You know, I think that, you know, athletes who play at the college level, they learn to watch film. So, you know, when I just refused to do it because I didn't want to like see this guy. And, you know, I think I did try to watch film, but then I would see this dude just, you know, the guy was fighting, beat the shit out of somebody. But then I would be like, man, that guy sucks. And that's not me. That he did that too. So this is irrelevant.
You just get
to
mad.
watch this guy just beat up other guys. Because that, you know, the first few times I'm like, man, this guy's really good. And, you know, you know, having this conversation with myself in my head. And then we get out there and the guy's terrified to fight. You know, so I'm just like, man, forget that. I'm not watching film. I'm not watching this guy beat up some bozo. I'm just gonna go out there and you know, thug it out and see how it goes, you know. And you know, I had a lot of success with that early on.
You know, I've seen a lot of guys right now we've talked to, and they kind of say something. Some of them, they're like, I don't really watch tape. What I do is I have my coach watch the tape, and then he says, this is what we're working on. Have you kind of went to that in your career, or do you watch tape now? I mean, do you have that where other people tell you what to do, kind of?
Well, now I do. We watch film together. But, man, the guys that I'm fighting are, you know, world-class guys fighting other world-class guys.
Yeah.
You know, it's not some guy that they're trying to build a name for, you know, fighting some guy fighting out of his garage, you know, at his basement. I fought a guy who literally trained in his basement by himself before. And I was just like,
he didn't beat it, did he?
No, I'm not in the first round. So, but I'm not fighting those guys anymore. So now, like, the game has changed. The caliber of fighter has changed, and so is the other people that they're fighting. So I can watch, you know, Darren Stewart fight Maki Patoyo. Yeah. And but okay, you know, Maki's a world-class fighter. Darren's a world-class fighter. Let's see, you know, what mistakes each one of them made in this particular fight, and you know, I can learn from that.
Okay.
So like when you're a promoter and you got amateur bouts on the card, usually like one or two good punches that a fighter takes, usually, you know, the bout's over at that point. You run into to Ben Davis on a 185-pound title fight. I don't think I've ever seen anybody take more power punches in one round than he did.
Man, that guy.
Period. Any level. Any level.
Yeah.
Real.
Yeah, that you know, that's one of those fights where, like, in the middle of the fight, like, you know, sometimes I can't really speak for any other fighter, but like I'll land a solid shot and they don't go down. I'm like, okay, the next one. Okay, the next one. Okay, the next one. But man, like 50 punches later, I'm like, man, this dude's still standing here. And so, man, I'm kind of like looking at the ref like, man, why are you letting this dude, you know, take this beating? Like, you should have been stopped this. You know, he's not getting paid. We're not fighting. You know, it's an amateur title. Like, who cares at the end of the day? Even if he wins it, like, I hope that he's not going to be like, I won this amateur title, you know, 50 years ago, yada, 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 you know? So, you know, sometimes I look at these refs like, why are you letting this
I think
go on like this?
I think Ben Davis has probably got a lump somewhere on his head where he can go, yeah, I got this. You know, he's proud of it, I'm assuming.
But man, you know, that's it was that funny. The
tough dude, man.
That dude showed up to the weigh-ins with like he had just got off work. You know, he I think he was doing some construction, so he had like, you know, concrete and dirt all over his pants, and you know, he just
took off his boots.
Yeah, just literally came from work, got undressed, got on the scale, and you know, put his clothes back on and went home or wherever, you know, or wherever he went. But yeah, you know, there's something to be said for.
He's tough.
You know, so some guys are not as skilled, and man, sometimes even in the UFC now, you'll see somebody get tired of beating up on somebody, and then the other guy comes back and wins the fight. And you know, that dude, he wrestled, I believe, at UT Chattanooga. So, you know, usually those wrestlers, they're pretty tough and durable anyways.
Well, I think you kind of answered the question as well. He had to go to a work site the next day, and his buddies were there. Like, you take one punch and you leave, you're years from that period, you're going to be hearing about that. You know what I mean? Like, he did the right thing. he did the right thing.
But man, I ran into him like years later at the, at like a restaurant or a Chipotle or something like that. And man, he was just, the coolest guy ever. He like, I think it's really cool when you fight somebody and then like y'all are cool afterwards. Like there's no animosity, there's no this, there's no hatred or whatever. Like, yeah, you beat my ass, and he acknowledged it. He was like, yeah, you beat my ass, but man, I had a good time, or whatever. And then I'm like, oh man, that's cool. He's not that guy that, maybe if he would have won, maybe if he'd won, he'd be telling people, 10 years later that he beat me as an amateur or whatever. But super cool guy, man.
Up to this point, have you had any guys in there that like there'd been some bad trash talk before the fight or anything like that?
Man, I think there was a guy, DaKarie Sanders, who I was supposed to fight. He's an amateur that I got sick cutting weight and had to pull out of the fight. And man, he was just talking so much shit, so much trash. Oh, he's scared. He this, he that. And then, man, we met as professional. I think it was like my third or fourth pro fight. And I submitted him in like 15, 20 seconds or something like that. And, yeah. So I was like, man, you talking all that shit for years.
Yeah.
But man, whenever he walked out, man, there was a trail of piss from the locker room to the cage. Like I could tell, like he was shaking. I could tell that, man, his mouth wrote a check that his ass couldn't catch. And,
he knew it too.
I didn't even have my hooks in. I just, as soon as one arm got around his neck, he tapped. And that's the one fight that I regret. It's my only submission as a pro, and I regret even going for that. Like I wanted to beat that guy up, man. He's the only person I think that I've ever fought that I didn't like before I fought him. Yeah. And I just wanted to I wanted to hurt the guy, but he took the easy way out. So, he quit. So, that right there is also satisfying.
We'll let him deal with that shame for the rest of his life.
It is what it is. I mean, you got to look at yourself in the mirror, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So you had an amateur fight that I just can't figure the decision out. You fought the Axeman, Brad Taylor.
Yeah.
It was a draw. What happened in that fight?
Man, I had him in a tie clinch in the first round. The whole fight was wild, man. That fight started and stopped like 4 or 5 times. But I like his cup slipped out of his pants, and they had to like tape around the outside of his pants. They had to tape his cup in place.
What?
His shorts ripped or something, and his cup wouldn't stay in the job. So this is Alabama for you, man. So they like taped around his crotch on the outside of his pants. So they like made a pocket with tape.
So it would accentuate. It would accentuate his midsection. Okay.
Yeah. And man, he threw a kick and like dislocated. I didn't block him. I like stepped back and it dislocated my finger. So I'm looking at my finger. I look at him. He stops. I stop. I look at the ref. The ref's like, keep going. So, I'm like hopping around the cage trying to like pop my finger back, back in place. But I had him in the tie clinch, and I was working his body over, and he kind of like crawfished out of the clinch as I was throwing a knee, and I kneed him in the face, and the ref stopped it and took a point immediately. So, he won the first round, and which, I don't think that I should have got a point taken because why?
Chris, maybe we could file something on this one. We could probably file something. I know it's, years later. But
years later.
It don't matter.
File something with Alabama Commission.
No. We
yeah,
want
but
all points.
it's like when somebody, you got their back and they turn their head and when you're throwing a punch and you hit him in the back of the head, that's you don't intentionally throw a knee. When he ducks down, that's not on you.
Yeah, and I always felt like the rule was if he moves after I initiate the motion, then that's on him. And that's what they tell you in the UFC now. So
Yeah.
Whatever.
Exactly.
We're in Alabama. It's whatever. I believe this is my first fight with Chris Conley in Spartan Fitness. So, man, I just felt my skill level kind of, go from a fighter relying on athleticism to, okay, now I'm developing skills and
actual skill.
Yeah, and technique. So, I feel really confident going into that fight. So I lose the first round, and I felt like I won the rest of the fight, but it is what it is. So yeah, it was a good fight. It was a crowd pleaser. He hit me, I hit him. We hit each other a lot, and it was fun.
Did you pop your finger back in, or did your corner do it?
No, I popped it back in the middle of the. In the middle of the round, while trying to dodge punches and kicks and stuff, I'm like kind of on my bike, pulling on my finger because it wouldn't go back in, man. Like my pinky was like it was still straight, but it was like sitting like down here by the other knuckle. So I'm like running around trying to get it back in there, and finally it went.
Damn.
I'd like to see that. I think that'd be entertaining to watch. Your first pro fight. What made you finally say now it's time? Because I mean, you're fighting every other weekend as an amateur, obviously.
Well, Chris really slowed things down for me. He's like, man, you're not gonna fight. You're not gonna fight. You're not gonna do what you've been doing. Okay, cool. I need someone looking out for me. Because if I look out for me, I'm fighting every week.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there has to be somebody to save the fighter from themselves, and Chris was that guy. So he was kind of like the filter, because at this point, like, I'm having a successful amateur career. People are selling tickets and making money off of me. I'm not making any money outside of sponsorships and stuff. So, of course, everybody wants me to come fight because they know that, I'm probably going to knock somebody out, or, it's going to be like a pretty good brawl, I forgot the question. What was the question?
Yeah, I mean, when did you know it was time to turn pro?
Man, well, I wasn't gonna go pro earlier, but because they were like, you should fight at 85, and I was like, hell no. And then, we went and saw Marcus Brimage fight Cody Garbrandt at UFC, whatever it was, and the headliner was Daniel Cormier and John Jones. And man, when those two dudes walked out, I realized how big these 205ers really are. And this was always my goal. Like, I was like, I'm gonna be there one day. Like, that's gonna be me in that cage. I know I'm gonna get there. And I just saw, and I understand that that's like the cream of the crop, two of the best to ever do it at that weight. But I realized like how big those guys really are. So I was like, oh, middleweight it is. And so I had a few more fights so that I could like perfect the weight cut, which I never really did until I met my wife. And so I fought a few more extra fights, and then it's like, okay, I can make middleweight. The shit sucks. Like it sucks, but I can do it. And I know I can do it. And so that was what took me so long.
So in his pro debut, he fights a guy named Josh Raspberry, and Josh has got a lot of fights up until this time, but like you kind of saw the difference between a 205 Eryk Anders and 185 Eryk Anders in your punching power, and you stopped him in under a minute, and it was like, man, that punch you landed was ridiculous.
Yeah. Man, Josh, he's one of those dudes, he was an independent fighter, trained himself. And it showed that he looked like he trained himself, exactly what you would think of a guy from the middle of nowhere, Alabama would look like training.
But that's what the beginning pro circuit looks like, though. I mean, it is
that's
what
not
it is.
on me. That's not on me. That's who I called the promoter. I called StrikeHard and told him that I wanted to make my pro debut. And I'm sure they sweetened the pot for Josh. I'm sure, almost positive he got paid more than I did for that fight. He probably made more money in a loss than I made show and win. And
I got a question though for that.
I didn't care.
Are you getting like part of your tickets that you sell? I hope, because you're bringing a crowd every time. But please tell me they were at least giving you part of the tickets you were selling.
Yeah. I think I was getting like 20% of the tickets I was selling. I think I got like 300. But man, I really wasn't like, I didn't care about the purse because I was making good money in sponsors, especially this being a pro fight, pro debut. Everybody wants to attach themselves to somebody who's winning. And I was winning. And
were you a big ticket seller?
What's that?
Were you a big ticket seller?
Yeah, I think so. But this is the thing, like everybody knew that I was gonna fight next weekend anyway, so they weren't like, calling off of work to come see me because like, oh well, Eryk's gonna fight, 2 weeks from now anyway, so we'll just catch the next one. But man, when I made my pro debut, the arena that we had there was maxed out for sure. Deontay Wilder was there. Like, they pulled out all the stops. Yeah.
Do you feel like you got a lot of extra sponsor because, you're Alabama football ties? You think a lot of people just knew who you were from that, and that kind of helped you a lot?
100%. Yeah. My name kind of got me in the door to have the conversation with, business owners and things like that. There were a lot of other guys that, probably more skilled than I was, but we're really struggling in that department because who is, Joe Blow, but, a lot of the thing about football is like, they don't know what I look like. They just know the name. They'd be like, I know. So I'd be like, hey, this is Eryk Anders, former Alabama player, made the SAC in the national championship game, yada, yada, yada. And, through an email or whatever, and they would be like, oh, yeah, let's go have lunch or whatever. And I'd, sell a spot on my shorts.
Nice.
There's certain benchmarks that fighters have to have. And they knew you obviously had the hammer. You were definitely a good nail. But the one question, I believe, up until this point was if you had the cardio. And then your second pro fight, you went the distance. No, almost the distance. They stopped in the third round against Garrick James. And it was kind of a frustrating fight for yourself as well as, to watch it.
Yeah, they first I was supposed to fight somebody and then that guy backed out. So the week of the fight, they went and found somebody else and he took the fight, came up there. And yeah, man, that guy was an athlete too.
Well, he showed up. Yeah, huh? He showed up most of the time. Like he can't do anything when somebody doesn't give you anything.
Well, man, I of course I wanted to go out there and knock him out because, man, we're fighting in Tuscaloosa. Like, some of the guys that I played ball with are there, and who doesn't like knocking somebody out? It's a very exhilarating feeling, and unless you do it, like you'll never know that feeling. And but anyways, I wanted to knock him out, but man, we were on the feet, and early in the first round, man, he threw some kind of crazy kick, and I just felt the air go past my face, and I was like, hell no. So and he stopped me too with a good punch, man. He was just athletic and unpredictable, like he was just doing all kinds of wild, crazy stuff, and just barely missing it. So I just thought it was imperative, and we had so many guys fighting at the time. I had like two of my training partners in my corner because we had other guys that were, like seniority. Like these guys had been there longer. They're fighting for a bigger promotion or whatever. So Chris Conlon, my head coach, wasn't there. So again, I'm back to instinct. And so man, he really didn't have any takedown defense and didn't have very much of a ground game. I think I had 3 takedowns and, once I got him down, I kept him down each round. So, thank God for that.
Well, up until this point, like you're on a roll. Obviously, you're kind of going where you want to in terms of career trajectory. And you get a call October 21st, 2016, and you make your Bellator debut against Brian White. Like, as somebody in your position, was there nervousness on your end? Because there's eyes on you at this point.
Well,
like eyes that you want to see you.
And this is the biggest payday I've had. I think they paid me like 1,000 and 1,000. 1,000 to show up, 1,000 to win. So, I felt like I was rich, and but I thought that, I would have the opportunity to go out there, win a fight impressively, and maybe get a Bellator contract, because at the time, man, I was just trying to make money. So I really didn't care, Bellator, UFC, whatever. Long story short, I go out there and knock the guy out in like 24 seconds. And which is, it was like 6th fastest knockout in middleweight history for Bellator or something like that. So I thought, man, it's really hard to be any more impressive than that. And, I'm walking around the arena afterwards. I see Scott Coker. I'm like, hey, Mr. Coker, appreciate you having the opportunity, giving me the opportunity to come fight for you guys. And he was like, what's your name? I was like, man. I was like, okay. I think I'm going to have to fight a few more times before I fight for get a contract. And, man, really the only reason why I got that fight is because, when Bellator, travels around to whatever city, they let the local matchmakers and promoters match the undercard. Yeah. And so the guys from B3 matched the undercard, and they knew me and Omar Johnson would be good ticket sellers. So they, of course, brought us in, and, they threw us on the undercard, and, that's how we got the fight.
Were you a last-minute replacement?
I don't know.
No?
They called me as soon as they knew that they were going to Memphis. They were like, I had a full camp. I was able to train and do everything.
You know what? You were a last-minute replacement for your LFA bout when you fought Jon Kirk, March 10th, 2017.
He was the replacement. I was supposed to fight a guy named
Trevor Giles?
Nah, man.
Alessio DiChiricio?
No, Larry Crow. He trains with Derek Lewis in Houston. I was supposed to fight him, but the week before the fight or the week of the fight, his house burnt down. So, of course, he had to, deal with his duties as a man and a husband and father and stuff. So, okay. And, but they found that Kirk and, so that was a big fight for me because I was in San Antonio. I had never fought back home in Texas. And I'm from San Antonio. So, that fight was important for me to have happen. I didn't care who they had to find. I was like, man, you guys find somebody, I'll fight them. I don't care who. I'll move up a weight class. 85 is as low as I could go, but anywhere between 85 and 205, I would even fight heavyweight if the opponent was right. And, but they ended up fighting Justin Kirk.
So he had 33 fights. Like, he had a lot of experience. I mean, it wasn't like a lopsided record in terms of losses or just an overwhelming record in terms of wins. But when you look at yourself and you look at like where he's at, experience does matter. But a lot of times those records don't show your amateur fights, which I think really helped at this point, like all that experience you had.
Yeah, that guy had a lot of fights. And I of course I knew that going in. But one, I knew that he was taking this fight on a week's notice. So I know he didn't have a full camp. He was a little bit older. I think he was in his middle or late 30s. And he hadn't fought in a while. So, I really didn't care who I fought, but I liked this matchup.
Now, fighting it in San Antonio, how many people from like high school were hitting you up for tickets?
Oh, yeah. No, they were, but you know how it goes, man. I even do it too. If I can get in somewhere free, I'm going to exercise every opportunity and, feasible way to do that. But, I'm not in control of the tickets, and they were sold through Ticketmaster. So, I just send them out. But, man, the people that I went to high school with, man, we're still very close to this day. Quite a few of them. So, man, my closest friends really showed up and to support, and that just meant more than anything else. So my high school coaches came. It was a great day.
Yeah. Cool. You also had the eyes. You also had the eyes looking at you that you had desired as well. like with the Scott Coker and Bellator.
Yeah,
I mean, LFA is a great launching pad.
Well, and they were on TV too. Like, you didn't have to have some crazy sports package to watch LFA fights. They were on Access TV, which is on like basic cable, So, it wasn't. But also, I also knew that LFA had the most fighters in the UFC from any other promotion at the time. So I was like, cool, this is a great stepping stone for me to get where I'm trying to go.
Now, we're about to jump into like the more, now we're into the pros and stuff like that. But at some point in the interview, you kind of mentioned, hey, that's Alabama for you. Before we get into your serious stuff, I want you to try to remember one real ghetto story, something crazy that happened in one of those amateur shows that you just got to tell
greasy amateur stories, yeah.
Man, man, that first guy, that Kevin Tidwell dude that I fought, on this particular night, I didn't fight. I wasn't fighting, but my teammates were there. And so, I'm in the back, goofing around. It's not about me. So, I'm watching them, it's kind of like politicking with the promoter and, just hanging out, having a good time. But man, that Kevin Tidwell dude was there and he was getting his hands wrapped and his wife was standing over him. She was all, doing this shit with her neck and fucking, I can't even do it. And she's like, I don't know why you fight. Dude, man, she was just hounding his ass. She's like, I don't know why you fight. I don't know why you want to keep doing this. You just keep getting your ass beaten. Yeah, dude, I'm talking about the whole time. The whole time he was getting his hands wrapped, she was just sitting there cussing his ass out. And finally, I was just like, lady, he's about to go fight. Do you think he want to hear this shit before he goes? You don't think this already running through his mind every time that he fucking been knocked out? Every time that he been hit hard, every fight that he didn't win, you don't think that he's thinking about this shit right now? Take your ass on out, get out of here, man. Go shoot. And man, I kicked his wife out of the locker room. I just couldn't believe. I'm sitting there watching.
You it is.
Like this. And I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, man, get your shit and go. And he should probably divorce you. I would leave you. I don't care how many kids we have together or whatever, but man, goddamn, I'm finna go fight already. I already know I'm not good. This is no secret to me. Maybe I just like it. Maybe I like doing it. Fuck, leave him alone. Get out of here.
I think you were also concerned. You did the right thing. Yeah, I think you were also concerned that maybe your fight was about to leave as well. She's trying to get him into the car.
This is later. I didn't fight this. I already fought him. So I wasn't even fighting that night. I was just hanging out in the locker room with the rest of my teammates who just so happened to be in the same room as him and his wife. And she was just going off. And I'm talking about everybody who was warming up, hitting pads, everybody stopped. Everybody like this, just watching. And I was like, hey, man, you know what? Hit the bricks, man. Get out of here, man.
Well, I don't know if he got the W that night in the locker room.
But he did not. He took 2 L's.
What about in the locker room? I think you helped him at least get a draw by throwing her out of there.
Maybe, but it was definitely a 10-8 round for sure. He was just taking it there. He wasn't saying anything you're hearing like pads, crack and people breathing hard and warming up and people and just has this braiding. It just got quieter and quieter and quieter, and so it makes her sound louder and louder and louder. And man, you could just see him. He's a white guy, but man, by the end of this, he looked like a cooked lobster. Man, he was just red, just all over. Like you could just see the steam coming out of his ears. But he just, he really didn't really have the cojones to,
shut up.
Yeah,
he was gonna have to go home with her. So.
Yeah, shit. Tell me this, after I lose or whatever. But I'm doing this for me. I'm not even paying any bills. Like this leave me alone. So I had to step in and save my dog.
My man. So yeah, and your 8th fight. This is kind of like your coming out party, in my opinion. In your 8th fight, you actually headlined the LFA 14 in Houston against Brendan Allen. So Brendan Allen at this point, 7-1. He's got a super high submission rate. You're 7-0 with a high knockout rate. It's almost like that classic grappler versus striker fight going into this. What were your thoughts?
Man, he was definitely the most skilled opponent that I had fought up to this date, and he had even beaten one of my teammates as an amateur, choked him out. And so, man, I already knew who Brandon Allen was, and he trains down there in Biloxi, or he did at the time. So he's not even that far from me. And yeah, I knew who he was, but like I said, I always just saw him as the guy in the way of where I'm trying to go. So, and I truly, from the bottom of my heart, felt that I was going to knock him out. I even told him in an interview. There was this guy, I can't remember anyway, somebody who had us on the phone at the same time. I told him I was going to knock him out in 3 minutes or less. And I almost did it too. I dropped him pretty early in the fight, but man, I think he was 21, 22 at the time. And super resilient, man. There were several times in the fight where I thought the fight was going to be over, but he found a way to get back in the fight. Had me in a pretty nice guillotine there, I think, in the fourth round. That had it been in the first round, maybe I don't get out of that guillotine. But yeah, we fought 5 hard rounds, and really had nothing but respect for the guy. The first 3 rounds, man, he took it, but I think that he won the last 2 rounds.
For me, the scorecards had you win 49-46. I think you had some. I heard the scorecards.
Yeah, I mean, that may have been what they said, but man, I was the guy in the fight, and I don't think. I think that I lost the last 2 rounds, if I remember correctly. And I just remember, after the fight, going and sitting down next to him, tired as you can be, and just having a conversation with him, and yeah, super cool guy.
Was it the cardio? What was the issue with the last 2 rounds? The cardio?
No, man, I just thought that the very next punch was going to be the last punch. So, man, I was like swinging for the fences for 15 minutes, and we wrestled a lot. I took him down. Took him down a few times. So, yeah. And then the last 2 rounds, it just, his youth kicked in. Like I said, he was 21 at the time. So,
was that a lot of pressure for you?
A lot of pressure? No. I never really felt any pressure, and I still don't feel a whole lot of pressure when I go fight. To me, it's a competition. There's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser, and a loser. I just got to go out there and make sure that I'm the winner. So not really a whole lot of pressure, I would say, in the sense that, like, I feel like I have to go out here and win. It's just like I knew I was going to win. Even the fights that I've lost, I'm like, man, there's only one fight in my entire pro career that, like, I did not think that I was going to win before the fight even started, and that wasn't it. I knew that I was going to beat. I knew that I was going to beat Brandon Allen. Like I said, I truly thought that I was going to knock him out in 3 minutes or less.
So in between fights, I mean, we're talking about like a pace that is, I mean, crazy in regards to the number of times you're fighting. Do you drink a lot in between fights? Do you have a lot of downtime, or are you right back in the gym?
I used to go, depending how the fight went, a lot of my fights ended in, 2 minutes or less. So, I would show back up to the gym on Monday and train just like, I had never fought. But for that Brandon Allen fight, I think I took a few days off. I made myself take a week off because, man, I'm pretty sure I had broken my hand, but maybe like a stress fracture. Like, my hand was pretty swollen. It hurt. Like, they had to cut the gloves off like pretty much immediately after the fight because, man, my hand was just throbbing. And yeah, so it swelled up pretty good. So that's the only fight.
So you say that you took some time off because you think you may have broke your hand. You had to have your glove cut off, and 29 days later, you're making your UFC debut.
Well, man, it was going to be sooner than that because they offered me Trevin Giles.
That's where it was. That's where my notes are. Okay.
A week or two before that, but man, my hand was still swollen, and I was like, nah, I can't. If I can't. So I said no to the UFC the first time, and they called like a week later or 2 weeks later, and it was like, hey, Rafael Natal in 10 days. And I just felt like if I say no again, then that's it. Then they're not going to call a third time. So I was like, all right, cool.
Or they're going to get you killed. You know, they're going to line you up a shark on your first, you know, your UFC debut.
Well, man, you know, Trevor Giles is a hell of a fighter, man. I think he's only lost twice, and you know, he's on a roll, you know. So, you know, I don't think that's an easy fighter, especially back then.
There's no fight. There's no fight. We're in the UFC. There's not a single one that's easy. So your UFC.
That's a lot of pressure the UFC puts on people, though, because you know you're not the first fighter, and you know you go back to Chris's era and stuff. You hear the exact same story. It's like, Mike Brown won. I turned him down one time, but then that second time, it's like I felt like I almost like my back's against him. I can't turn them down again.
Yeah, well, I didn't. Well, obviously, I didn't expect it for them to call back so soon, but I knew that I would have I felt pretty confident that I'd have a second chance because one, I had a lot of knockouts. I think out of the 8 fights that I had, 5 of them were knockouts, 6 of them were knockouts at the time, or TKOs. So I know that they like that. And the fact that I played and won a championship at Alabama, I knew that, you know, that'd be a good storyline. You know, I knew that I was a marketable fighter. And that's, you know, essentially what the UFC is all about. If you got a story they can market you, then, you know, you got a little bit more slack, I feel like. So I knew that I would get a second shot, but I did not feel like I would get a third. So, because I was already 30. You know, I was already 30 years old. I think 29, 30. So, you know, at the end, you know, just like the NFL, they start looking at your age and be like, man, we're not messing with this guy anymore. So I just needed to get my foot in the door, and then, you know, how long I fight would be, you know, dictated by, you know, the fights that I won and how I fought.
Your entry into the UFC was against, well, obviously you did them a favor by coming in against Rafael Natal, but it was also his 17th UFC appearance.
Wow.
That's a lot.
I didn't care, dude. I was like, yeah, we finally made it, you know. And, man, you know, I watched film on that guy, you know. He had knocked some people out. You know, everybody kept talking about his Renzo Gracie black. He was a Renzo Gracie black belt. You know, all this, that, and the third. And I was like, man, listen, y'all can say what you want to say about that black belt, but, man, when we start throwing these hands, you know, that black going to turn to white real quick, you know. And, but, man, you know, something, it's really difficult for me to explain, but, you know, walking out to that fight, you know, I felt like, you know, I was like, well, no, I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I'm not really nervous. Should I be nervous? So I was kind of getting nervous that I wasn't nervous, you know. I was like, I didn't feel anything, you know. You know, sometimes when you go fight, like your adrenaline is pumping, so your legs feel heavy, you know, your stomach kind of hurts a little bit sometimes. It's like, for me, it's like, okay, I know I'm ready to fight. I know I'm finna, you know, like, go fight because I know how my body is supposed to feel. Like, even when I go play football, walk out for football games, like, you know, you still have like physical reactions and feel just a little bit off, but, you know, you competed so much, you like, you know, that you feeling like this, like you're going to be faster, you're going to be stronger, you're like all your attributes are going to increase, you know, it's adrenaline or whatever. But, man, I didn't feel anything. And as soon as my feet touched the canvas, I knew 100% like I was going to win this fight. I was going to knock him out. I did not know the fight was going to go how it did, but, man, as soon as I don't know what it was, but as soon as my feet touched the canvas, I think it's like, okay, man, look, I'm not going to slip. You know, I think that may have been what it was. I don't know. It's like the texture of the UFC mat is different than like the tarps that you fight on as an amateur. It's like, oh shit, you know, my feet are actually gonna have grip. I'm not gonna be slipping and sliding all over here. So I just remember as soon as my feet touched the mat, I was like, man, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna get a performance bonus. Like, I knew from the bottom of my heart, I was like, man, I'm gonna go out there and smoke this guy.
Yeah, you made a statement. And Natal never fought again. That was his last bout.
Ooh.
but he was a little bit older, so I think that he realized like they got these young guys coming in, and I think every athlete goes through that for the most part. They have their prime, they have their heyday, and then you fight one fight too long, and they bring in like a young bull, and I was 30 at the time, but my body felt like I was in my early 20s, because when I was in my early 20s, my body always felt like shit because football is so hard on your body, lifting all those weights, getting in all those collisions, that when I stopped doing all those things, my body kind of rejuvenated itself. And I feel better at 34 than I did at 24, if that makes sense, physically. So I still, even though 30 kind of sounds old for an athlete, for me, I felt
your peak.
Great, yes.
At your peak, yeah, for sure. We got a couple more. I don't know if you got time constraints, Eryk. I mean, I really wanted to concentrate your amateur career. Could we knock out a couple more? Would you mind?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So you're supposed to fight John Phillips. He pulls out. So you're kind of dealing with the same stuff that you.
Well, I think he had visa issues. That's another guy who was never really skilled for. I was like, my mouth was watering for that fight because that guy couldn't defend a takedown to save his life. And he was a lefty, so I was like, man, that's perfect. I'm just gonna football tackle and blast double. But then he couldn't he couldn't get a visa to come over to America, so they had to find another replacement.
So they bring in Markus Perez, who, and both these guys, Eryk and Markus, are both 9-0. Markus takes it on last minute notice. Man, that guy could take a punch.
Ooh. And man, that whole fight week was kind of crazy because, that's when California started like checking people's weight before the fight and whatever. So I already know like I'm a heavier middleweight, and I water load too. So I'm even heavier, drinking all of that water. So man, they're calling. I'm just dodging them like it's a bill collector. I was like, man, forget that.
Bill collector.
I don't want no bullshit. I already know they're gonna come with some crazy stuff. And they shoot me a message like, hey, if you don't answer this phone and we can't check your weight, then we're not gonna let you fight, and then you're in violation of your UFC contract, and they're gonna sue you. And I don't even know if that shit is true, but I was just like, all right, whatever. So I get on the scale. I'm like 212, 215 or whatever on Monday, and then flying out on Tuesday to California, to Fresno. And man, as soon as I get off the phone, Jason House, my manager, calls me, and he don't ever call me unless it's like business or
serious.
Some. So man, he called me. He was like, "Hey, I just got the phone with the California Athletic Commission, and you're gonna fight Trevin Giles fought that night too. He's like, you're gonna fight Trevin Giles' opponent, and Trevin Giles is gonna fight your opponent because they're closer in weight, and you guys are gonna meet at a catch weight. I think it was Neto Beto, or I can't remember who he fought. And I was like, no, the hell I'm not. I'm fighting this guy. I'm fighting Markus Perez, and I'm gonna make weight.
So they were trying to play matchmaker.
Yes, the commission tried to have me fight Trevin Giles' opponent.
California.
And I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that. I trained for this guy. I was water loading. I talked to this dude at 5 o'clock at night. It's like literally the heaviest time for me. And so now I get on the phone with the commission, and I tell them what's up and what I don't have any status or nothing like that. It's only my second UFC fight, but I pretty much told them that I was going to fight Markus Perez, and that was that. And they, said okay, but you can't fight at middleweight anymore in California. And I was like, well, man, I don't ever plan on coming back to this.
Yeah, piss on you.
So were you in California? Were you in California when they were trying to chase you down, or did they sign the Alabama?
Man, I got off the plane as I landed in Fresno, and Jason called me, and then the commission called me after I got off the phone with Jason. So I'm walking through the airport. I don't even have my bags yet, and I'm cussing and motherfucking, and if you're just walking through the airport and you saw me that day, you're probably, man, you know,
get some mental health issues.
I bet they got the UFC fighter.
Yeah. So,
well, you probably, if it's California, you probably look like the standard homeless person, you know, walking down the street, just, you know, yelling.
My face is sunken in. You know, I got on sweats and.
I think it's a little different if someone like me, I'm walking through the airport going crazy. People are like, oh, but this dude is like fit and angry. And it's like,
they're just hiding.
Whoa, be careful.
I just thought that was crazy. I was like, man, you're here. It's just your job is just to make sure that like all the dots, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, man. You're not here to play matchmaker or. And by the way, you pissed me off like this and not helping my weight cut. So y'all are sabotaging me at this point. And you know, I just gave them, you know, a piece of my mind, and you know, they saw it my way at the end of the day. But then they were like, you know, you can't fight at 205. You have to fight at 205 if you're fighting California again. I was like, man, I'm not gonna fight in California ever again because
you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said it. You saw Cormier, you saw Jones, and you're a middleweight.
yeah. I'm like, man, look at these, man, y'all crazy, man. You know, these guys are 6'4", and that's really the reason why I fight at middleweights is the stature thing. Like I'm only 6'1". Man, those top guys, that's like heavyweight, man, they're 6'4", 6'5", and man, they're walking around at 230, 240. You know,
yeah.
Owen St. Prue told me he's got up to 260 before. I'm like, man, what the hell? No, I'm not fighting, man. Nah, yeah, I kick rocks, man. I'm not, you know. Because they're walking around at that, and they're probably 230, 235 on fight night. So I'm like, man, I'm straight on that.
One of the things at that in that fight that's surprising is, like, for instance, Chris, have you ever had somebody come over to your house and without asking, just kind of open up your refrigerator, just kind of see what's in there and kind of rummage through it? So at the end of this bout, it's his second fight in the UFC. He calls out Lyoto Machida to fight him in Brazil.
Oh, I love it. They had to love you.
You don't have a lot of, you know, clout in the UFC, but you know, your actions and your mouth is certainly kind of endearing you to the organization.
I mean, you know, shoot or shoot. You know, I know that they were looking for an opponent for somebody for him to headline. You know, I think he was in like that 12 to 15. You know, he was ranked 12 to 15, I think. And, you know, I hadn't lost the fight, hadn't even taken like a good shot, you know, so I thought that I could beat any and everybody. So I was like, and he had been knocked out in his last 3 fights. So I was like, man, this is a perfect fight.
Perfect time, yeah.
Yeah, you know, perfect fight for me. You know, he's going to go out there and, you know, at the time, he wasn't doing the karate thing anymore. He was trying to like box everybody for some reason. But
that was a hard fight. That's a hard one. Like
yeah,
Machida.
You know, that early in my career, you know, the movement. I think
you won it though.
That's the thing. Like how the judges see the score or score the fight. I think it was really an eye-opening fight for me. Because, you know, I was landing power shots, and although he landed more, like he was kicking me with his big toe. So I remember thinking during the fight, I was like, all right, that's not a significant strike. That didn't hurt. That didn't flinch. You know, I didn't flinch. I didn't, you know, surely they're not scoring that as like he's not scoring off of that. But yes, he was. I think he only won like the first and fourth, I think, or the first and the fifth. But I think that I clearly won 3 out of the 5. I can't remember which.
So let's frame this.
I split him open and I dropped him a few times.
So let's frame this properly for the people at home. So in essence, Eryk comes in, calls out a guy to fight him in his hometown, who's in essence a legend at this in this sport of mixed martial arts. You drop a split decision in his hometown. So I think the crowd may have played effect. You know, maybe come into effect in the decision process, but you won that fight. Like I've scored it. I've watched it 3 times. Like that's a hell of a run in the UFC for your first 3 fights too, I might add.
This is the thing for me. You know, if you look at his demeanor after the fights, before they
he was done,
and you look at mine, like his head's down. He said, like, he thinks he lost. I think I won. Then they read the scorecards, and it's like we switch. You know, my head goes down. He's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I won." You know, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I lost," kind of thing. So, you know,
well, your corner advice too. Your corner was telling you that you were winning the fight up until that time.
Well, man, if you look at him after the fight and look at me after the fight, I think it's pretty apparent.
He's telling you the truth.
Who you know, probably won the fight.
With the UFC at this point, you know, you're Dana, Joe Silva. Did any of them tell you something similar to, you know, keep your head up, or, you know, the judges were wrong? Because Dana doesn't like, you know, bad judges' decisions either.
Nah, I think my role with the UFC was pretty insignificant at the time. So they just, you know, I know Dana White has like voiced his opinion about wrong scorecards before, but you know, nobody was very vocal about this. There were a lot of like media organizations or whatever that came out all over the place, and like all of them thought that I won the fight. You know, the only people on earth who thinks that Machida won the fight are those three judges.
Two of the judges.
Really just two of them, anyways.
I think the issue is that it wasn't like a travesty. It wasn't a robbery. And I mean, it was a close fight, but it wasn't like a, wow, what were they looking at? And it was because Machida was walking backwards the entire fight, which made him incredibly difficult, you know, to touch for Eryk. So you're pursuing against a guy that really doesn't want to interact with you. And like if you had to do something different, I would see probably try to make him move forward, because he never did at any point in that fight.
I did a lot of following in that fight. And I think now, after training, you know, for however long I've been training, like I know how to cut people off now. And so I wouldn't have to follow him, and I'd be able to set him up and actually be able to draw him out versus him trying to draw me out.
So you trained with Stephen Thompson for that fight.
Yeah, I went.
How was your experience with him?
Well, I had worked with him before, just through a mutual friend who was going up there, and I was like, you know, Stephen Thompson's a younger, more explosive, better athlete than Machida, and yeah, you know, any chance you get to work with a guy like that, and you know, especially seeing like there's not a lot of guys who do that karate, or are successful with karate, especially at the UFC level. So, man, Wonder Boy is a super talented guy. I don't think anybody has command of range and distance in the UFC like he does, other than Adesanya. I think Adesanya does a good job of controlling the range and distance, but it's because he's always the taller, longer fighter. But man, Stephen Thompson can literally kick you from any distance. I remember one time we were sparring, and man, we were like literally nose to nose, like in the pocket, and he took like just like 3 inches back, and like his leg came over. Thank God I had a headgear. I was like, oh my God, how, you know, just how dexterous his hips are, and the speed and ability that guy has. It's wild.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a quick question here. At this point, obviously, you got a lot of fights, a lot of guys, you know, with different sets of experience. But Machida is, you know, probably the first Hall of Famer you're cracking here. Did you notice that in the fight? Is it something that you said, like, you know, all right, I can hang, or was it something special that he did? Can you give him credit, or were you feeling all right? How was that? How was the experience of fighting Machida?
Man, you know, that guy's a former light heavyweight champ, you know, former world champ. So I knew that he would be more savvy, you know, probably has some tricks up his sleeve. But, you know, it's not like I was overwhelmed or, you know, anything like that. It's not like, you know, he never hurt me in the fight. I hurt him several times. So, man, it was just a good experience. You know, I wish I could have came out there with the win, more so because, you know, half my money is dependent on winning or losing the fight. So
the worst.
I don't like that. I only got half my money, and but at the same time, man, you know, it is what it is.
You know, I've lost a couple split decisions in foreign countries, and if you lose a split decision there, I mean, it's kind of, I think, well known that you probably didn't lose. You know what I mean? So it doesn't help you, like you said, it doesn't help your paycheck. But I think the real fighters know, you get a split decision in a foreign place, you fight the foreign guy, you probably won.
100%.
So the pace of your fights are, in regards to the quantity of them, it's a hellacious pace. Like, you've got a lot. So you knock out Tim Williams in a third round, which is a fantastic fight. You were a heavy favorite in that. And you make the announcement that, man, I got to take some time off. I'm going to chill out for a minute. So, Chris, what that usually means, what it translates to, is less than a month later, he fights up a weight class against Thiago Santos.
But dude, I was, you know, that was kind of a crazy situation because, man, I was just sitting in my house on a Sunday, just on the bed, scrolling through social media, through Instagram, and all of a sudden a message pops up from Mick Maynard. I'm like, oh shit, okay, you know, the matchmaker hit me up, man. Let's see what he got to say, and it's just like, hey, would you mind fighting Thiago Santos at you know, in 6 days in Sao Paulo, Brazil? And man, my only response was, you know, what's the money look like? Because I'm not fighting him for what y'all are paying me now. Hell no, no way.
Yep.
You know. And then he went. Man, he kind of ghosted me. He didn't reply, and I was like, well, you know, that's that. And but man, what? You know, Jason House, my manager, the only reason why he was trying to hit him up, but he couldn't get a hold of him because he was on a plane from Russia. So I was like, because they had just fought in Russia that week or whatever. So I was just like, shit, you know, maybe I shouldn't have said that, you know, maybe because, you know.
No, you said the right thing. You said the right thing.
But then, you know, I'm having this conversation with myself. I'm like, nah, because it's a risk for me. Like, you know, I'm not in the best shape. I'm not in fighting shape. I'm in shape, but not fighting shape. There's a big difference. And man, you know, the Brazilian fans are like the most passionate and ruthless fans there are. So now I'm going into like enemy territory. So I was just like, nah, you did the right thing. You did the right thing. And then Jason hits me up. He's like, hey, are you for real trying to do that? And I was like, hey, dude, if the money's right, then yeah, for sure. I'll fuck, you know, whatever. And so long story short, man, they doubled my money, got a new contract, and I was on a plane the next day.
I love
That's not an easy fight to take last minute, but you also got to look, you know, what? They owe you a favor.
I really thought I was going to knock him out because I remember watching him fight David Branch, and David Branch just, you know, he looked like he just barely clipped him and dropped him. So I was like, man, surely I hit harder than David Branch. But what I didn't take into account was that fight was at middleweight, and I'm sure that, you know, he was putting his body through a lot to make it middleweight. So I think you're a little less durable at a lighter weight class. At least he was, and man, he was pretty durable at 205.
Yeah. So your next bout's Elias Theodorou. You lose a split decision. I mean, we've kind of talked about it on this podcast before. When Firas Zahabi comes up with a game plan, it's guaranteed pretty good results. But man, I think him even getting his hand raised in that bout, his stock tends not to rise too high because he just ran the whole time. And
you know, that was another fight where I was, you know, I was like, dude, he's not doing any damage. Like, yeah, he's touching and hitting me, but
it's frustrating.
For me, that's not fighting. That's not winning a fight. And but you know, he won the fight, and you know, it is what it is. You know, walking through the stands and sitting with my family after the fight, you know, even the Canadian fans were like, we don't know how he won that fight, how the judge saw that for him, and you know,
it was just,
you know, Eryk, unfortunately. In my opinion, the person who's doing the most damage is winning a fight. But You never know what these judges are looking for. I mean, sometimes you could do that and you're going to win a split decision. Sometimes you're going to lose. It's like, how are you supposed to know what those three people are looking for? I mean, most of the time it's the guy who's coming forward and putting on the pressure in a close fight's winning. Absolutely. And I remember in these bare knuckle ones we just had, there was 2 fights where I thought the guy who won because he's putting forward the pressure lost. It's like, you never know what these judges are looking for. How are you supposed to fight based on it? I wish they would all do like those fights in Kansas, it's open scoring. So you after each round, you know what the score is. That makes sense to me.
Too.
I mean, it'd be like going to a football game and you're like, what's this? It's a fourth quarter. Are we up? I think we're up by 3 and the game's over. No, we lost by 2. Damn, I didn't know. I mean, you know, after each round, I love the Kansas open scoring, man. I wish everybody would go to that.
Yeah, and the good thing about that is if you're later in the card and you're watching the fights, you
know how it's going.
Yeah, so
they can know it if the guy coming forward is getting a win or if the guy who's counterpunching winning. Then you can adjust. I mean, why would they not let you do that? You need to be able to adjust the fight.
Not to mention, you know, across boxing, MMA now decades. When's the last time you actually saw a judge have to answer for how we actually judged the fight?
That's
Never.
Crazy.
Like, let's go through your card. How did you see this round that way? What are you doing? The 2 other guys, they don't. They are actually protected by the commission, and you don't even have access to them.
Yeah, I mean, boxing, I understand because I feel like there's a lot of corruption in boxing.
And Elite Bird.
They give draws so that they can sell a rematch and, build the guy up and things like that. So, but it's not like that in MMA. Like, guys aren't taking dives or.
All right, so you changed camps and you moved to Colorado for camp. You train with Muay Thai specialist Mark Montoya.
Yep. Yeah, that loved it up there. Love those guys. I think I kind of screwed myself because I'd go for 2 weeks and come home for a week, or go for a week, come home for 2 weeks. I was doing a lot of, back and forth. I should have just stayed and, I'll see y'all when I see y'all kind of thing. But man, that's the one fight that I was talking about earlier where I just woke up that morning, man. I don't know, dude. I just was not feeling myself. I don't know, I can't put a finger on it, what the issue was, but man, I did not feel right in between my ears for that fight. And I knew it was going to be a long night before the fight started.
We're talking about Khalil Roundtree. And, you coming from a Muay Thai camp, you're fighting a guy that did his training camp in Thailand. And it seemed you were real frustrated. Like you just couldn't figure out, like you got stuck in between.
It just, Eryk Anders did not show up that night. And not to take anything away from Khalil Roundtree, he won, very decisive decision. But I'm a much better fighter than I showed in that particular fight. And
you think there's a little burnout? Was there a little burnout at that point?
I don't know. It's hard for me to remember back then. I don't remember that being me thinking about that too much. It was just I don't know, dude. Sometimes you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you don't feel like fighting that day. And that was that was that day.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't figure that out. I'm like, hey, it is what it is, It is what it is.
Hey, Eryk, we really appreciate this, man. Like finding out about all your past and exactly what got you to where you are right now. You're killing it right now. We look forward to seeing you up in the top 10, 15.
Wait, I got one thing.
God dang it, Mike.
I apologize. All right, so I'm like a psycho when I watch people's films. Like I really am. So certain people, like they have certain habits to kind of wish themselves luck. Like they just kind of, Do you keep a piece of gum in your mouthpiece?
Dude, I cannot have cotton mouth, dude. I hate it. I can't stand it.
It.
That's all I think about when my mouth gets dry. It's like, man, fuck. So I always keep a piece of gum between my teeth and my mouthpiece, and then in between rounds, I'll scrape it out of there, chew it,
wow.
moisten my mouth again.
I knew it. I think I'm like, wait, you did an interview, and I'm like, either somebody gave him a stick of gum or he pulled it out of his mouthpiece. So I'm watching it. I'm like, man, ain't no one giving somebody a stick of gum like right after a fight. So I figured you had to have it in your mouthpiece.
Man, you gotta keep that mouth minty fresh, especially on top of dudes beating a man. You don't want to.
So if Joe Rogan's interviewing you want to have that good breath. Smelling breath.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, good. I figured. I knew I caught something. Cool. Chris, go ahead, man.
That's it, man. I just want to thank you for giving us your time and can't wait to watch you bang it out here again soon. Go ahead, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Eryk.
you guys for having me.
Appreciate it, brother.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.